So this is not what I expected to be doing today, but I'm actually on paternity leave, so I thought it'd be a great time for me to do a video that I've been wanting to do for a while now, which is share my favorite books about being a first-time manager. I've been in management now for over 10 years, and I remember very clearly being a first-time manager myself and feeling completely overwhelmed. Like, how did I get here? What do I do now? And so I spent a lot of time reading different books, articles, blogs, whatever I could get my hands on to try to figure out, like, what are some best practices around how to manage people, how to lead teams, how to build organizations. And so I want to share with you some of my favorite reads from back then and also more recently that I think are super valuable for first-time managers. Let's go ahead and jump into it. The first book that I read when I was a first-time manager, and still to this day is one of my favorites, and that's The Manager's Path by Camille Ricketts. This book I think is super approachable. It's an easy read. It covers all the basics that you need to know as a first-time manager, and it does so in a really thoughtful way that I think is really memorable and sticks with you. I've reread this book a couple times, and I highly recommend it if you're a first-time manager or if you just want a refresher on some of the basics. Camille is also the creator of Level Up RN, which is a career framework and website that I have linked below if you want to check that out. She has other resources as well that I think are super helpful. But again, The Manager's Path is the book that I would recommend. Next up, we have Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Now, this book I think is super important because it talks about how to give feedback and how to receive feedback and how to manage your team in a way that is both kind but also direct. I think as a first-time manager, we tend to avoid difficult conversations and we tend to shy away from giving feedback because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or we don't know how to give the feedback effectively. And I think this book is a really good read on how to do that. In fact, I even used this book when I was managing at Google because it had such a great framework on how to give feedback effectively and how to have those difficult conversations. This book is super actionable. It has tons of examples and it's a quick read, so I definitely recommend it. The next book I want to talk about is The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier, otherwise known as MBS. This book I think is super important for first-time managers because it provides a framework for how to coach your team members versus how to manage them. And so many times as first-time managers, we fall into the trap of telling our team members what to do, how to do it, checking in on their progress, making sure they hit their deadlines, etc. And we forget to actually coach them and help them grow and develop in their careers. And so I think this book provides a really nice framework for how to ask questions and how to guide your team members to come up with the answers themselves. And I think that's a super important skill for first-time managers. The next book I want to talk about is actually two books, and they're actually the same series. They're by the same author. And these are books that I read probably within a month of each other. The first one is How to Win Friends and Influence People, and the second one is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. These two books I think are classics for a reason. They are super timeless, and if you haven't read them, you should. I think How to Win Friends and Influence People is a great book for anybody who wants to improve their soft skills. And I think as a first-time manager, it's super important to be able to build relationships with your team members, to influence them without authority, and to be able to work with them to achieve common goals. And so that's why I recommend this book. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a book that I think every manager should read, not just first-time managers. It provides a great framework for how to be effective in your role, how to set boundaries, how to prioritize, how to make decisions, how to lead teams, all really important things for any manager to know. So definitely recommend both of these books. Next up, we have Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Now, this book I think is super important because it talks about how to build culture, how to define culture, and how to change culture within organizations. And as a first-time manager, you might not realize that you are a culture carrier. Like, whether you like it or not, the culture of the organization trickles down from the top. And so you as a first-time manager play a huge role in setting the culture for your team. And so this book is really helpful in understanding how to do that. He talks about what are the key components of a great culture how to measure it, how to improve it, and how to change it. So definitely recommend this book. The next book I want to talk about is actually a podcast, and it's called Masters of Scale with Reid Hoffman. I listened to this podcast when I was a first-time manager, and I still listen to it today because I think it's super insightful. It's hosted by Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn, and he interviews different CEOs about how they scaled their businesses, what were the challenges they faced, how did they overcome them, and what are some of the lessons they learned along the way. And I think as a first-time manager, listening to these stories and hearing how other CEOs built their businesses and scaled their companies is super insightful. You can apply a lot of those learnings to your day job, even if you're not a CEO. So definitely recommend this podcast. Next up, we have Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. Now, this book is another book that I think is super important for first-time managers because it teaches you how to have difficult conversations, specifically conversations where there is high stakes, where emotions run high, and where there is a potential for conflict. As a first-time manager, you will have these types of conversations, whether it's talking to your boss about a raise, whether it's talking to a teammate about their performance, whether it's giving someone difficult feedback, you are going to have these types of conversations, and this book gives you a great framework for having those conversations effectively. So definitely recommend it. The last book I want to talk about is actually a series of books, and it's the book series called The Mom Test. Now, I know I've talked about this series before, but I think as a first-time manager, you're going to want to read these books because they're going to help you talk to your team members more effectively. This book series basically gives you a list of questions that you should not ask when you're trying to get feedback from others. And instead, it provides you with a list of questions that you can ask to get better answers, more honest answers, and more actionable feedback. So I think these books are super helpful, and I always keep them nearby whenever I'm interviewing someone or whenever I'm asking for feedback. Well, those are some of my favorite books for first-time managers. If you're a first-time manager, I'd love to hear what are some of your favorite books. Please comment below. I always love hearing from you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you found it useful. And if you did, please consider subscribing. I post new videos every single week around how to advance your career in tech. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!